Welcome back. We are still in Chapter 5, Graphs, but today we're discussing Lesson 3, Slopes and Rates of Change. Now, one thing you need to know about slopes and rates and change is those are two words that are referring to the same concept and idea. So we are going to be talking about different things, and just know that sometimes we'll call it the slope, sometimes we'll call it the rate of change, but whatever we're talking about refers to both of these because these are both kind of like the same thing. It's just a different way of stating it. So the slope, so when we're talking about the slope, we're talking about the rate of change, okay? They mean the same thing. The slope of a line is the ratio. Oh, there's that word ratio again. Does anybody remember what ratio, right? It compares two things. But whenever I see ratio, I like to know that I'm talking about a fraction. And so when we are discussing slopes, slopes are going to be written in fractional form, okay? So that's very, very important to know. The slope of a line is a ratio that measures the steepness of that line, how steep it is. The sign of the slope tells whether the line is rising or falling. So a rising slope, the sign of that slope is going to be positive. Now, something that may look as if it had a positive slope, you can have a really, really steep positive slope that may look something like this. So the slope of this line would be positive. Or you can have something that's not as steep, but it's still rising. So maybe something more like this. This is still rising. It's just not as steep, but the slope would still be positive. So the slope for this example would be positive, and the slope for this example would also be positive because these lines are rising. One is just rising more quick. How would you say? More quickly than the other. This one isn't rising as quickly, but they're still rising, and so the slopes for this would be positive. Now, a falling slope, the sign would be negative. And you could have something that would be falling really, really fast, and it might look something like this. This line would have a negative slope. Or it could be gradually falling. It could look something like this. The line is still pointing downwards and still pointing downwards, so they'd both be negative slopes. All right, let's go ahead and turn the page. You can find the slope of a line by comparing any 2 points of that line. What we're going to do is we're going to find the slope of the line between 2 points. And remember that we have 2 points here. This represents the x and the y. This represents the x and the y. Okay, so we have 2, 1. And we have 4, 4. So let's figure out what the slope is between those 2 points. Let's graph them first. So 2, 1 would be right here. The x part is 2, so 1, 2, and then up 1. So this point right here is 2, 1. And then the second point would be 4, 4. 4, 4. Oh, what? The x part is 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, which would be this point right here. Now, you can make a line anytime you have 2 points because you just connect the dots. So we have 2 dots, connect the dots, boom, you have your line. And every line has a slope. Every straight line has a slope. So let's go ahead and figure out how we determine the slope or the steepness of this line. So the first thing you look at is how far you have to move up. So if we start at this line, we are definitely, to get to this, when we start at this point, to get to this point, we definitely have to move up, okay? So let's look at how many units we have to move up. So we have to move up 1, 2, 3 units. So we're moving up 3 units. Okay, and that's called the rise. So you have to move up 3. And we're not to this point yet because we have to move to the right, and we have to move to the right 1, 2. So we move 2 to the right. And that, when you move to the right, that's called the run. So you have to move up 3. If you start here, you want to end up at this point, you have to move up 3, 1, 2, 3, and then to the right, 1, 2, to go from one point to the other. Now the slope, how you determine the slope is the rise over the run. And this is the ratio, this is the fraction that I was referring to right here. So this is the moneymaker, rise over the run. Now rise, that word, you have really 2 options. You can either go up or you can go down. If you go up, it's positive, okay? The rise would be positive. If you go down, the rise would be negative. Okay, so let's look here. When we started here and we're trying to get to this point, did we go up 1, 2, 3, or did we go down 1, 2, 3? Well, we went up. So that means our 3 is going to be positive. It's going to be a positive 3. Okay, and we know that I'm just writing a positive just to accentuate the fact that we're going up. But, yeah. Okay, now, so we have that part. We've dealt with the rise of the slope. Now we have to figure out the run. Now the run, if you move to the right, whatever distance you move to the right, it's positive. If you move to the left, the distance is going to be negative. So after we went up 3, 1, 2, 3, do we go to the right or the left? And we went to the right 2 units. And whenever you go to the right, you're going in a positive direction, so that's going to be positive 2. So our slope of this line actually ends up being 3 over 2. And that's the answer. That's the slope of this line. Now, when you get up into higher level mathematics, they're going to use a lovely letter. It's M. I don't know why they chose M, but M represents the slope. And so you would say, hey, the slope is equal to 3 over 2. So that would be your answer. It would look like that. And it's written in a fraction. And always on top of the fraction is the rise. You have to remember that, the rise over the run. Okay? Perfect. Let's look at a couple examples. So here on the next page, we're going to go ahead and find the slope of number 1. So we are, oh, is this the same problem? 2, 1, and 4, 2. Okay, so this is the same problem. We already figured that one out. So let's go to, move down to number 2 here. 2 and 3. Okay, we are going to start at, we have 2 points. This is 1.01 here, and this is 1, negative 2. Now, it doesn't matter which point you start at, you'll get the same answer. And maybe I'll do that for this one. Let's go back to 1, and I'm going to show you how we're going to get the same answer going the another way. So the first time we started at 2, 1, right? And then we ended up at 4, 4. And remember, our slope was, what was our slope? We figured out it was positive 3 over positive 2. That's what we just figured out. Well, now what I'm going to do is I am going to start at 4, 4 and figure out the slope to go from 4, 4 to 2, 2, 2, 1. Okay? Perfect. So we're going to start here. You're always doing the rise first for the slope. Okay? So the slope, I'm just going to write it off to the side. The slope equals the rise over the run. Okay? So from here, if we start here and we're trying to get to this point, are we going to be rising, or are we going to be going up, or are we going to be going down? And if we start here and we're trying to get to this point, we're actually going to be going down. So remember, when we go down, it's negative, and we're going to be going down 1, 2, 3 units. So our rise would end up being a negative 3. Okay? And we haven't got to our point yet because we have to go over. Now, which way are we going? Are we going to the right to get to this point, or are we going to the left to get to this point? And yes, we're going to the left. Well, how many units? We're going 1, 2. Okay, and when we go to the left, it's negative. So it's going to end up being a -2. So our slope ends up being -3 over -2. And at first glance, this looks different than the slope that we found before. But what do we know about a negative being divided by a negative? A negative divided by a negative is a positive. And there you have it. You have the same slope. The slope equals 3 over 2, which is the same as we just found when we went from this point up to this point. We went the other direction. So it doesn't matter which way you go. You can go this way, or you can start at this point and go up and right, or you can start at this point and go down and to the left, and you'll get the same answer every time if you do it correctly. So the slope of this line is 3 over 2. Okay. So now let's go to problem number 2. So it's obvious that it's written in here and it wants us to go from this point to this point. So we'll just start there. So the first thing that we have to do is I always want to do the rise or the going up or down first, because that's on top of the fraction. So let's start there. So with this point here, it doesn't matter. We'll start here. And if we're trying to get to this point, are we going up or are we going down? And we would be going down. Let's figure out how many we'd be going down. So 1, 2, 3. So if we start here and we're trying to get to that point, we're going to go down 1, 2, 3. And when we go down, remember going down is negative. So down -3. And then are we moving to get to this point? Are we moving to the right, which would be positive? Are we moving to the left, which would be negative? We are moving to the right. How many? 1. So it would be a +1. So for this one, our slope would be -3 over 1, and that would be our answer. Now we know that -3 over 1 is the same thing as -3. So sometimes you would see a slope that is just -3, and that's the answer. But you know that -3 is the same thing as -3 over 1. Those mean the same thing. Okay, cool. Let's move on to problem number 3. So we have these 2 points, -1, 1, and 3, 2. So let's go ahead and start at -1, 1 and try to get to 3, 2. So like I said before, it doesn't matter which one you start at. But what it does matter, I want you to, if we start here, I want you to try to go up or down first. I always want you to try to figure out the top part of the fraction, which is the, if you're moving vertically up or vertically down. So here, to get to this point, we're going to have to move up. We're going to have to move up 1 unit. And since we're moving up, it's positive. So the first part of our slope is going to be a +1. And then to get to this point, we're going to have to move to the right, which is also positive. We're going to have to move to the right 1, 2, 3, 4 units. And since we're moving to the right, it's positive. So our slope would be 1 over 4. Right there. Okay. So yeah, great. We are going to do some other problems in just a little bit. So see you back in a bit. Bye.